what type of team would you want to see in the first round for the Nashville Predators of those teams that we're talking about? Whether it's, I guess you could include Dallas and Winnipeg in theory. They could sneak their way back in, or somebody from the Pacific Division. Which are the teams that play the style that concern you the most, and which are the teams that play the style that you think the Predators match up best with, if that makes sense?
It does make sense. It's a great question. I tend to think, well, first of all, Colorado scares the crap out of you, right? You don't want to play Colorado in any fashion whatsoever. So if they somehow slide down to the 8th spot, they're going to be in big trouble. But at that point, I think there will be no expectations anyway, right? You'd be like, well, Colorado's going to win. So, and then hopefully there's a stunner or whatever. But I do like the Minnesota matchup a lot. And I say that because they've got some talent for sure, but they don't necessarily, they got, and some guys like Hartman, like I get Greenway, Dumba, they play a heavy game, but overall they're a skilled team. And I'd like to see the Predators play them. I don't like Minnesota's goaltending, regardless of what the numbers say, and I just think that Nashville is primed to beat them. Vegas is the tough one for me because we haven't seen Vegas's full complement yet. It's kind of like the Titans in the regular season, right, where we never saw Derrick Henry, AJ Brown, and Julio Jones all together on this field at the same time, except for what was it? It would have been like 10.1% of the plays or some crazy number.
Yeah, it was like 120 snaps or something.
Yeah, like that. Yeah. So it's kind of like that, right? That you've got, Mark Stone he's healthy now, but he had some time. Marchessault's had some time. Eichel's been on the shelf since the trade, obviously, from Buffalo, and so they intrigue me a little bit. Now their goaltending is suspect as well as Minnesota, so they're beatable, but they're so loaded every other place. It's like they're kind of like Colorado, actually, where they can beat you 8-5. Those old Pittsburgh Penguins teams of the early 90s.
So I agree when you start to look at like the sheer talent on the roster. If Pacioretty, Eichel, Stone, like if all those guys are in there playing at their peak, you're like, holy shit, that's a lot of dudes.
Oh, yeah.
They can just take over a shift.
Yes.
But is it the defensive clog it up, muck it up, make it dirty? Like Colorado might just be too talented to, like, it doesn't matter what style.
Yeah, that's true.
Too skilled, too talented. It doesn't even though you could call them, I don't want to call them a finesse team because that feels like an insult, but like they just have too much talent. The question is, can you cross over to just elite skill and talent to overcome the way, like the San Francisco 49ers play football would be the way I would describe, that the Predators hockey team, where you can,
great comparison,
like you can make it physical and dirty for 60 minutes and find out how much the other dude loves hockey.
Mm-hmm.
That's what makes the playoffs so great in the NHL. And would Vegas are they just too talented to overcome that style of play, or can they play that heavy game too?
I think they can play the heavy game. I really like the Tanner Jeannot in particular is going to be the key. He'll be the X factor for the Predators in the playoffs if they play against a heavy team, because this is a guy who is fighting for a Calder Trophy, which is unbelievably awesome. But he's got 14 goals and 14. He's got 28 points, okay, in 47 games, which doesn't blow you away necessarily, unless you know that he's a rookie and undrafted and came out of nowhere and all that.
And starts every possession in the defensive zone.
Yeah. But on top of that, he could throw his weight around. He also, by the way, leads them in penalty. Well, I guess Borowiecki technically does, but he leads all forwards and Predators forwards in penalty minutes. And so, and it's not, he's not a goon. He's just very physical and takes the body and doesn't shy away from anything. And you love the way he plays the game, whether he impacts a score sheet or not. And so it doesn't rest all on one guy, but I think he leads the charge, okay, for that, let's say, bottom six forwards. And when you have a bottom six forward who plays like that, who can also contribute offensively, I think that gives you a real advantage in the playoffs, as opposed to, and I'm just spitballing here, Vegas's top six who are lethal, and then their bottom six are horrendous. It's a huge gap fall off, right? And Colorado kind of has that as well, even though they can hurt you from the back end. So I don't shy away, as I have in other years. The Dallas year, when the Preds played Dallas, for example, they got beat up. End of story in the playoffs. And that's where I think the Tanner Jeannot thing will be the difference maker. Because not only can he score when he's out there, he's not just a goon. He can go out there like a Scott Nickel. No, there's no offense against Scott Nickel, right? Or Cody McLeod, or those guys that were in the lineups around that time.
He
can actually, he can do all those things. He can fight. He can do whatever, be physical and brutal. But he can also score goals, and he can also play make, and he can also drive puck possession in the offensive zone. So, and again, the defensive zone faceoffs. So I like them. I think they're better suited now than they were even last year or 2 years ago for a physical matchup.
Well, and they might have two and a half of those guys.
Yes.
Yakov Trenin is not really.
Yeah, I didn't even get to him.
Not really that different.
Yeah, I didn't even get to him because his point totals are a little different. But he's got 11 goals.
Yeah,
I mean the guy could find the back of the net. So I guess my point is that I like their skill right now, the Predators, for a playoff matchup short of, again, Vegas or Colorado. But they have the extra component now of, we're not afraid to back down. We're going to go after it. We're going to the dirty areas. We don't care. We're driving the puck possession, and we're going to knock you off the puck on the forecheck. And they've got all those things now that they didn't have 2 or 3 years ago when they played those other teams. And that, by the way, was the difference in that Dallas series.
Yes,
that was the difference.
I completely agree, and I think it's their identity, and I think it's the way they win games in the playoffs. I'm concerned about their skill level in the playoffs. I'm not worried about the physicality. I think that's what levels the playing field against a highly skilled, but frankly, a Peter Laviolette style team.
Yes,
this team would just eat that one for lunch. It feels like.
Agreed.
On like a shift in, shift out 7-game series. What about St. Louis? I mean, Dallas, I would be worried about a series with Dallas. I don't think Dallas is going to get there, but that type of, like, again, we saw that type of matchup. Also, there's history and mental stuff there, but Winnipeg, there's some history there too. I don't know. I don't think they fall into the physicality, but they can play that way because they're big on their top six. They do have goaltending. Where does St. Louis fit in? Because it sounds like you're saying you like the matchup with Minnesota. Where would a matchup with, if somehow St. Louis and Nashville are 2 and 3 and they're playing, how do you feel about that matchup?
I like that matchup a lot, but I would say that St. Louis is a tricky one because I haven't watched them a lot this season, but what I have seen of them has not impressed me as like, oh, they're a true contender. Let's put it this way. In a 7-game series, I would take Nashville 9 times out of 10 against St. Louis. So I'm not too worried about them. That being said, there's something I could be overlooking. I pride myself in being fair, and I have not seen a lot of St. Louis Blues hockey this year, unfortunately. I've seen a handful of games, 9 or 10 games, but I haven't like watched them, with the intent of like, oh, this is a playoff team. They could. I mean, I will now after this conversation, but going up to this point, I haven't. There's nothing that I've seen out of them on a consistent basis that worries me, other than Kyrou, of course. Other than that worries me in a long playoff series against the Predators.
Okay. I was watching the game against Dallas, and for some reason, all my brain was thinking about was which teams are going to play like this, Dallas, in the playoffs, and that style is going to give Nashville trouble.